Hey everyone, welcome. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Appreciate everyone joining today. We're going to be talking about internal data sources and what we added in 2.1. So I'll be going into detail on that, but we'll give, again, a couple minutes just so everyone can filter in. So thank you for joining us. All right, for those who have just joined, I just got done saying that we'll start within a couple minutes here. We're just going to give everyone a moment to join up, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, Jody. Good morning. All right, we'll give it one more minute here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. I think we're coming up on 2 minutes after the hour here, so I'll go ahead and get started with an introduction. So my name is John Kessinger. I'm our product manager here at Wallboard, and the goal of today's webinar is I'll be telling you a little bit more about internal data sources. Now, we don't have to use that super technical name. We can make it a little bit easier to understand by simply calling it spreadsheets. Now, these are something we've had in Wallboard for quite some time. However, we added a lot more features to this system in our latest 2.1 release. And really the goal was that we found that a lot of people were using Google Sheets and Excel to manage their digital signage because it's an interface that everyone's familiar with. Everyone has used a spreadsheet at one point in their life. And for certain use cases, it's a lot easier to be able to update your content via spreadsheet. And so our goal was to bridge the gap between some of the awkward workflows that people would have to do when using Excel or Google Sheets. And so we implemented some features that we think are a little bit more specific to digital signage in our own version of spreadsheets. So I'll be going into more detail on this, but let's go ahead and get started. So what is an internal data source? I'll just, again, take it from the top. An internal data source is basically a spreadsheet. It's a table where you have multiple columns that you can create. And those could be different data types in Wallboard. Again, I'll talk more about that in a moment. But the idea is that you display rows of information. So this could be anything from like a menu board, could be a directory, it could be even more complicated use cases such as like interactive content, etc. Um, but the main idea why someone would use an internal data source or a spreadsheet is because it's much more simpler to update. The again, everyone has used a spreadsheet at one point in their life. So ultimately, the goal is that without any training, someone could easily update their signage just simply from a spreadsheet. The other good thing that comes out of spreadsheets, and I think why people gravitate towards those in certain circumstances, is because it can literally just be one place where you can update everything. So, for example, we do have some clients who update tenant directories. Think of a commercial real estate company, for example, and they have multiple properties. Well, what if they could just, instead of having 50 different spreadsheets that they're having to manage in Excel or Google, In Wallboard, we just have one spreadsheet. We have 50 different tabs for all the different buildings, and we use that one spreadsheet in order to manage the tenants at all of their buildings. So the end goal again is that non-technical staff can manage this. Again, it's a interface that everyone feels comfortable with, and the main goal is that they do not have to touch the content editor. So we love for people to create designs and create solutions within our content editor. However, it could be a little overwhelming for someone who's not as technical. So again, the goal is to make it so they can update content without having to go into the designer. Now, we don't just allow you to put in, let's say, pieces of text or numbers, et cetera, into a spreadsheet. We had to offer something that was much, much more. In digital signage, I think it's sort of a unique situation in where things that may be represented in a spreadsheet can also be applicable to digital signage, but we have to represent them a little bit differently. A good example is scheduling. Yes, you can go into a Google spreadsheet or Excel, and you can add a date and a time field. But what if I need to do more advanced scheduling? What if I need to even upload an image? Again, let's say I have an event calendar and I need to show, not just who is having meetings today, but maybe along with the group name, of the meeting that we're showing, we also want to show their logo. Or there's for some reason I want to show images that are in my spreadsheet. If you're to do that in Google or Excel, you'd oftentimes have to host that image elsewhere. You'd have to take that link to the image, put it in your spreadsheet, and that's a little bit of an awkward workflow. In Wallboard, though, you can simply just upload an image into your file manager, and then you can reference it whenever you're building the spreadsheet. You can also use things like dropdowns. Why would this be applicable to signage? Well, sometimes you may need dropdowns because you may have a specific template, for example, that is expecting certain inputs. A good example is, let's say you have an event board, or actually better yet, let's say you have a menu board. It's split into two different sections, and I'll show an example later. You have food and you have drinks. Well, whenever I want to add an item, I want it to go to the certain part of the menu depending on what type of item it is. Well, if I create a drop down that just has two options, food and drinks, there's no way that the user can input something that will not fit within to those two categories. For example, they can't just type in drink, and because the column is actually called drinks, that it doesn't go to the right place in the menu. So it prevents errors. The other thing that we can do is we can also schedule. So again, this is more applicable towards like event schedules, reader boards, sometimes the door cards that sit outside of meeting rooms. But this could be applicable for other things. For example, you could have a food menu, and there could be a case where maybe there's a limited time offer. Maybe you want something to be removed from the menu after it expires. So I can show you an example of that. And last but not least, with Google and Excel, what a lot of people like about those platforms is that they can easily share the spreadsheet, meaning they don't have to give the user access to the entire system. They just simply want to give that user an interface to where they can update the information, and that's it. So we wanted to provide the same concept in Wallboard. Basically, instead of someone having to log into Wallboard to be able to edit a spreadsheet, you can now just simply share a link. Now, of course, due to security reasons and things like that, it is optional. So if you don't want to create a public link to where someone can edit a spreadsheet, that's perfectly fine. It's just an option there for people that want it. And what this really allows people to do is they can delegate responsibilities. So again, you think of an example where you have a menu board. We're at a casino, let's say. And the restaurant manager at that casino, he only needs to be able to update his menus. But he's not a designer. He doesn't need to go into our content editor, design a new menu, etc. The casino has already done that for him. He just simply needs to update the prices, say when something's out of stock so it will be removed from the menu, etc. So for him, it's a perfect example of where we can just simply share a spreadsheet. He accesses it via the link, and he may not even know what wallboard is. All he knows is that he just updates the spreadsheet and it changes his signage. Also, though, especially when you are delegating responsibilities, you want to make sure that everything can stay in line. You don't want the wrong information to end up on the display, or you don't want the right information to be removed from the display. So we can also lock rows and columns to prevent unwanted edits. It also makes sure that your templates continue to run. meaning if you are displaying the price column and someone accidentally deleted it, we can prevent that happening entirely. So we'll see some more examples of internal data sources, but I think to frame it first, I think it makes sense to talk about where they're used. So what are the use cases where you would see these? Now, I've already talked about some of these examples, but I'll go a little bit more in depth. So menu and pricing boards. This is probably one of the more common examples that we see. Of course, sometimes people have a POS system like Toast, for example, that they want us to integrate with, which we already have an integration for that, which is perfect. But someone may be a smaller restaurant and maybe they don't have a POS system that they use, or they don't have a unified platform that connects everything together. They just want to create a simple way that they can edit the menu boards at their location or their various locations. So again, we could display anything from prices, images, the titles of the items, descriptions, etc. But this is all good and well until you need to be able to display this information automatically. Some restaurants may have 10 items within their entree section. Another may have 5. So it's great that we can build these spreadsheets and these use cases, but this is all possible because we do have our designer in Wallboard. We can create templates and so forth that are dynamic and can fit many different types of information and amounts of information. Also, event and meeting schedules. Sometimes you may see where people use platforms like O365 or Google Calendars, but maybe they want to make their own meeting schedule board. Again, I provided an example previously where sometimes you have a use case where people want to be able to include the image of the group that the meeting corresponds with. They want to put the event title, the group's name, and then the start time. And so again, if you're trying to do this in Google Sheets or Excel, it'd be a little bit more difficult to upload the image because that's just not what Excel was built for. Excel was for making databases, not necessarily databases of images or media. So we've adapted to that. Also, in more employee recognition use cases, I actually really like this one because while yes, sometimes throughout your company you have more people coming in and or out, or there could be turnover, etc. But at least initially, what I like about this use case is that you could just update it occasionally or just update it once, and then it's basically automated forever. So you could make, for example, a template that shows work anniversaries or employee birthdays for the month. And the idea is I could have a database full of all my employees and their birth dates or anniversary dates, and we could create templates based on that to where it just rotates out those entries based on whatever birth date or again anniversary we're seeing in that spreadsheet. And this could also be applicable to tenant directories. I already described that. But what is also interesting is that this is also applicable to interactive experiences. Typically, what we've seen or what we've heard from our partners or customers is that where things can become a little bit more difficult when it comes to interactive is that maybe a partner or someone will help deliver an interactive experience, but then they won't be able to update it. So by having our designer and that we can bind these spreadsheets to every single use case, even down to interactive, it does make a case for where we can take more complex experiences and then make it so that our partners can hand it over to the customers so that they can continue to update their experience. So I just think this is exciting because I think a lot of times people have had really cool interactive solutions, but it's been so cool that they've had to learn how it's designed, learn how to update it, etc. So I think that this just offers a good pathway for those users. So what really changed in 2.1? I know I talked a lot about what internal data sources are. I've mentioned spreadsheets, etc. So what was the big change that came in 2.1? The first biggest change is that, again, we can now share these internal data sources via a link. It's optional. So again, if there's any security concerns that someone without a Wallboard account may be able to access our spreadsheet and update that information, it is completely optional. However, it is a uniquely generated link. So as long as that doesn't get shared, you will be able to share it with your colleagues as long as they don't share it outside the organization. Also, scheduling and dropdowns, we added these column types. So scheduling, if you've ever scheduled in our playlist, for example, we brought an interface that looks very, very similar to that, but for internal data sources. So again, if you need to schedule anything, I mentioned event schedules, but it also could be, let's say you had a retail calendar and you wanted to show certain items during certain seasons or months. Maybe an item or a service is particularly relevant on a specific month or week. You need to be able to schedule that, and you want that data to show on your screens at a specific time. We also added drop downs. I already mentioned an example of this previously, but drop downs give us values that are expected. Meaning, a employee, let's say that the trigger for removing an item from the menu is to put that it's out of stock again in the spreadsheet. If you have a drop down, it makes it so the user can't just put out of stock, abbreviated OOS, or maybe they just put out stock or something like that, or they misspell it. That's not possible with drop downs because we are setting what the content is expecting to display. Also, preventing unwanted edits. This is really important. So we can lock columns. The idea of this is to prevent broken templates. Again, if you were showing, let's say, the suite number in your tenant directory, if someone accidentally deletes that column in the spreadsheet, well, they can't because it's locked. So that would prevent a template from breaking. Also, let's say you want to lock your rows. Let's say there's specific tenants that are never moving in or out of the building, or let's say there's a tenant that owns a particular suite, so it's not possible for them to move in or out unless they sold the building or suite, for example. Maybe those are rows you want to lock because again they're not temporary tenants. But at the end of the day, I think what this also allows is it gives admins the confidence to where users can actually be the ones that are editing the information. I think we see this definitely in enterprise, but we even see this just with normal content managers. Nobody wants to break something, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Nobody wants to break anything. So I think the idea here is that we can just put up more guardrails, and then there's less mistakes that can be made along the lines, or along the road, I should say. So this is an example of what our internal data sources look like. I'll be doing a demo and I'll be showing you how to set one of these up and then how to tie it to a template that's within our template library. But I first wanted to show you an example. Over here on the left-hand side, you're going to see that we do have some a scheduling column. You'll see an example of this in the video that I'll show you here in a moment, but it will show a scheduling interface that looks very similar to our playlist. I also have a logo or a file field, and this allows me to upload an image to Wallboard and attach it to a particular cell. I can also include a group. So this is just a simple text column, same here with title. And then room, this is the new drop-down column that we added. So as you can see, these are predefined values. And the idea of this is that while yes, I'll never misspell a room name wrong, these room names are also used so that I can route these meetings, not only to show in a list on an event board, but I also want them to show on the tablets that sit outside those meeting rooms. So for example, if I have ballroom G here, at the specified time, this event will show on that door card, as well as the event reader board. And I'll show an example in a second, but it just gets you familiar with the interface. So let's quickly go into that demo video. So as you will see, spreadsheet looks just like what we saw before. There's the drop down, so I can click on it. I can select any of the predefined entries. You can also add more options as an administrator if you would like to the drop down. I can simply just type into these fields. I'll select again from the drop down, and then maybe I want to do some scheduling. So if you've used our playlist, this looks very familiar to you. So I can do specific scheduling. I could say it could be a certain date range. It could be a specific date. I can even say the time that I want it to play. And there we are. The other thing that I can do is I can share them with a colleague. So as you can see, there's a share button now on internal data sources, and I'll walk you through this process. But this is what the interface looks like whenever you've shared that URL with someone. Notice how it looks the exact same. That's the goal. And then this is what it looks like when it ultimately ends up on the screen. Actually, today we'll be walking through how we can set this up again from a template within our template library. And this again is those door cards that I was talking about that sit outside the meeting rooms. All right, let me go ahead and pause this and close out. This would be another example of an internal data source. So in this case, it's actually a little bit different. It's a completely different use case because I wanted to show you something that is not a typical example. This would actually be an interactive content that I'm about to show you. And again, it is powered by internal data sources. So what this is for a historical timeline that sits at a university. And the idea is that as there's milestones that happen throughout the school's history, they have sort of a history wall. And instead of having plaques or posters up, they wanted an interactive experience where people could go through the history timeline, view different events and things that happened during that time period or at that milestone, and attach imagery to it, etc. So previously, the customer was coming from a platform where they had to specifically go into an editor and design everything, and it was a little bit too complicated for them. In this case, yes, they had to set it up originally, but once they set it up, they can now manage everything through the spreadsheet. So if there's turnover in the department, if someone leaves the organization who was previously trained up on it, they can simply all just go into the spreadsheet and make the changes that they need to. Here's an example of what this looks like. So imagine this is sitting in the lobby, let's say, of a university. And so you can see it scrolling through these different entries. I'll just pause here very quickly. You'll see that up here at the top, this is the year that you saw there in the very leftmost column of the internal data source. This was an image or images that we were able to upload to Wallboard and tie to the various cells in those rows. This is the description. And this, if you have a lot of text, it will try to resize the best it can. And then here's just a cool icon just to give it a little bit more styling. Again, the customer can elect whether they want to show that or not. And again, like I said, this is fully interactive. So you can see I can stop it in the middle of the experience. I can scroll through it. Also, once I'm done scrolling, it will take you back to the beginning and continuously scroll. And while this isn't technically using a data source or an internal data source, it very well could. This is just other widgets and so forth that you would see in our content designer. And this is also something we actually see quite a bit. Sometimes people literally just want to have a video gallery that they can display on their screens. And this is an example of that. Maybe someone wanted to just quickly change out the names of these buttons with the video that's going to show whenever you click on it. And then they can swap out the video file here for the video file that corresponds with it. So you may see what I mean now. The idea is that you can take something that may seem complicated to someone, but you can give them an interface that they're familiar with to make edits very easy. And let's show one more example. This is the food menu that I'm talking about. So as you'll see, we have a column with the name, the description, the price of the item. You'll also see group and status here, and these are really important because these are the drop downs. Within the group dropdown, there's actually two different options that you could select, food or drinks here. So instead of someone just typing in drink, they can't because it's a dropdown. So they can only select food or drinks. Now, when we see this example in a moment, depending on what someone selects here, that's going to determine where the item is placed on the menu board. And then over here on the right, I have the option of saying whether something is in stock or out of stock. Again, if it's out of stock, then I just want to completely remove it from the menu. There's no way that someone can provide an option that isn't one of these two. And this is what it looks like at the customer site. So this is showing at a school's concession stand that sits outside of like their wherever they have high school basketball games. So as you can imagine, these are various items that they offer on their menu. And they're actually able to give the internal data source URL just to someone I think who's a part of the I can't think of the name exactly, but the booster club that runs the concession stands. So someone that they can trust that they can just share that with and they can update it. Of course, they don't want to provide them a login to Wallboard to have access to the rest of the school signage. So this is just a very simple way for them to sort of offload that responsibility on to someone that's a little bit more involved with the concession stand in this case. All right, so now that we've seen this, let's actually get into the demo where I'll show how we can create a event schedule board or an event reader board, as we call them, with an internal data source. And I'll show you again where you could get this template from our template library. So it's actually something that you can use and implement to get a feel for how to use internal data sources. So let me go here and let me just zoom in just a little bit for you. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do once we're into Wallboard, so if you aren't too familiar with content or how to create dynamic content, again, don't worry, we are going to start from a template. But in order to do that, you have to click on templates over here on the left-hand side. You may end up here on home. So just click contents and that will take you to where you need to be. Once you're here, we need to select something out of our template library. So I'm actually going to click up here at the top left corner, and then we're going to click Create from Template. Once we're here, we're actually going to click Public, and that's going to give you access to Wallboard's public template library. If I scroll down, you're going to see this template here called Event Schedule. Now, if you don't see this within your Wallboard instance, just let us know or let your partner know, and we can get that added. But this should be visible for all of you. So I'm going to click on it. It will allow me to preview it. But what you're going to notice is there's not any data like we saw in that video previously. It's actually missing. And that's good because that means we need to add it. So what we're going to do is just click Next. I can name it whatever I want. So I could just say that this is like today's events or what have you. But in this case, I'm just going to click Create. Now that I've done that, we now have to create the internal data source that's going to power this template. And then we can connect everything. So to do that, you're going to click on Settings, and then you're going to click on Data Sources. Once you're here, you're going to click at the very top, and you're going to see Internal Data Sources. I'm going to click on the plus button in the top left corner, and then you're going to get this pop-up. Now, you can provide any name you want here. I'm just going to call this Meeting Schedule. And I'm also going to come over here, and we are going to set the type to table. Now, this is really important because the table is what allows you to get the spreadsheet-like view. The actual backend of these spreadsheets is in a language called JSON, which some of you may be familiar with if you're a little bit more technical. If you're not, that's perfectly fine. That's the whole goal of spreadsheets and Wallboard. So you don't need to be overly technical and make databases and so forth. So just select table and you're fine. Also, store external data locally. I would go ahead and check this. What this results in is it allows things like images and other data. If you have, like, let's say, a large database of information, it allows it to download it directly to the server in the media player. And so it allows your playback to be better. So I would just suggest checking this. And then we'll click Save and Open. Now, this will take us into a blank interface, and it's first going to prompt us to create a worksheet. What's a worksheet? You know those tabs that you click on within, like, let's say, Excel or Google Sheets? It's exactly that. So I'm going to click here on the plus icon, and we're just going to call this Meetings. Now, you will see a schema option here. We are going to add to this list. The idea is that instead of you creating your columns, like I'm about to show you from scratch, that we'll already have some preset options for you. So I'm just going to leave it on default. I'm going to name it Meetings and click Confirm. Now, this is important to note. If you do want this to work with the template that we've provided, I would suggest that you use the same naming conventions as me in this database. Now, that doesn't mean that if you name your column, let's say event title, that's necessarily going to display event title on the display. So we can actually, from a visual perspective, change what that looks like. This is simply just so we can route the data where it needs to go in the content. So to create our first column, what we're actually going to do is we are going to click on this gear icon and click Edit. And what I'll do is I will just call this Title. Okay, that looks good. We'll hit Confirm. The next thing that I'll do is we will call this one Group. We'll add another one. This one will be called Room. But where this one is a little bit unique is this is where we actually get to use the dropdown that we recently added to 2.1. So we're going to select type, we're going to scroll down, and we're going to select dropdown. Under dropdown, you're now going to notice that this is empty. So what we need to do is click on this pencil icon and create a new dropdown list. So I'm going to click on the plus icon. We're just going to call this rooms. And now I'm just going to type in some placeholder data. So I'll have room A, B, and so on. Perfect. And now that we have those, let's click confirm. And there's our list of dropdown entries. Click confirm one more time. Now, when we click under dropdowns, you will see rooms. Perfect. Click confirm. So now you'll see if I click on this dropdown under this column, there's all the options that we had previously. But we need to add one more column, and that's for the date and time. So I'm going to add the column. We'll just call it date space time. It will add an underscore here, so don't be alarmed by that. Wherever you have a space, it will put an underscore. So again, don't be alarmed. We'll see that whenever we add it. But then for type, here's where you'll see our different scheduling options, and I will quickly describe these. Scheduling is what you saw in the video. It's where it takes you into a scheduling interface that looks just like we see in playlists. However, there may be a little bit too much information for you there right off the bat. Date and time will probably solve most of your use cases. This is typically applicable if you want to make, for example, a start time. It could technically work if you wanted to have a start time and date as well as an end time and date, but typically people use this for a start date and time. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and then click confirm. All right, so now that we have the let's say the structure built for our spreadsheet, let's go ahead and start adding some information. So what we'll do is we're going to create an event here, and we're going to call this our webinar prep session. The group is going to be wallboard. The room, we'll just put that in room A for right now, and then we need to schedule when it's going to happen. So we'll click on this calendar icon. I'll say it's today, but let's say it doesn't start till way, way later. So we'll say it starts at 7. We'll click PM, and there we go. You can also even type here. So if you need to correct it, you can easily do that by typing. Now we'll add one more here. So we'll just say webinar review session. We'll put wallboard here as well. And then maybe this one's in room B. And we'll say that maybe this is tomorrow. So we'll review how the webinar went then. Perfect. Okay. And there we go. Now I have my 2 entries. Now, sorry to disappoint if you wanted to see me fill out several rows of a spreadsheet manually, but maybe that's not the session for this. So what I will do is I will go ahead and upload some data that will allow me to automatically populate this entire list. When I did say that our spreadsheets are powered via a language called JSON, this is what I can use to quickly populate the spreadsheet. So if I just click here at the top, import from JSON, I'll go ahead and hit Control A and then paste my data in here and click confirm. And so that just saves me a little bit of work, especially for the purposes of a webinar. What I need to do though is because I pasted in all this information, you likely will not do that. You will likely just enter the information manually once and then continue to update it as time goes on. What I will do is I do need to add my dropdown back to this column because I didn't have it when I previously imported it. So I'll just click on this gear icon, click edit, and then we will change this to dropdown. Now we don't have to create the dropdown again, it's already there. So I'll click confirm. Now I can just simply assign these events to the rooms that they're going to happen in. So let me quickly click here. I will even say, I think this is even quicker than just typing in the information. So if, let's say, you don't get the full benefit of, okay, if you have like triggers set up in your content or you're routing information to a certain location or screen based on a value in a dropdown, if anything, it will likely be easier for your end users to make sure that things are spelled correctly, and they can simply just select the rooms quicker or the predefined options. But now that we have this, let's go ahead and press save. All right, so we have our spreadsheet here. You can see it's right here. And we're now going to go back to the content. Now, instead of clicking on this and going into our designer where you'd have to design this from scratch typically, what I can do is I can use our quick editor to just quickly adjust this. So we're going to go ahead and click here on these three dots and click quick editor. Now, just like before, you're going to see that this is blank. However, I can simply just select the data source like you see here that we just created. And there we go. It's populated in the template. I could even come here and I could change the fill color. So I could click here. Maybe I want to make it a darker blue. There we go. And then maybe I want to swap out the logo for something else. So I could upload a new image here in our file manager if I wanted to, but I already have one uploaded. There we are. And now I could even change some of the labels. Remember when I said that if you're going to set up an example like this, I would highly suggest that you use our template and you name your columns to match what I just did here. What I would like to mention is that, again, visually in the template, you can change what the columns are labeled without changing what they're actually given in, let's say, the internal data source or what the column is named. So you can just do it here in the quick editor. So for the title, I'll say that this is today's event schedule. Column 1, we'll say this is the event title. Column 2, I think group name is fine, so we'll leave it at that. We'll name column 3 location name instead of room name. And then column 4, we'll call this start date and time. We'll just switch up the words there. There we go. And then once we've done that, I just hit save and those changes have been applied. So when I go ahead and preview it, there it is. You'll also even notice here, we did have an HR meeting that technically started at 4 within that list, but this is also filtering out events that have already happened. So this is one of the reasons why we made such a big effort to improve our internal data sources is because Wallboard can respond to any type of data. So we have it's quite flexible. Again, you can apply logic and things like that where maybe I want the event to go away after it's happened or after it's ended, or maybe as soon as it starts, we remove it from the list here. But that's just an example of sort of how this works. All right, so now that we understand that, I am going to wrap it up here, and I'm going to show one more thing before we're done with the webinar today, and that is how do you share a spreadsheet with someone? So this is actually quite simple. So what we'll do is we're going to go to Data Sources, Internal Data Sources, and then as you'll see here, we have our meeting schedule. I'm actually going to do it with this one up here at the top, but you'll see that there is this arrow and it says copy shared editor URL. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. Now what I'm going to do is it's going to ask for an API key. Now this is typically where things get a little technical, but don't worry, it's not. You're going to click here on this add button and we are just going to create one through this wizard. So I'll say that this is my new API key, can name it whatever, and then we're going to click save. Once I've done that, I'm going to take this, select it here, and then click copy URL. Now that I have that, I could simply just paste this in here. And as you can see, I now have my spreadsheet that I can make edits to. Notice how I do not have the option to delete columns. Again, we're sharing a spreadsheet and we don't want someone to necessarily mess up the structure. So I do have it set to where we can prevent them from either deleting the tab here or the workbook, I should say, or the worksheet, as well as the columns. They can remove rows, of course. We could also lock rows if we wanted to, but the idea is that they will not be able to modify those. And so now I could simply just come here, add another row, and I could say that this is uh, the late night social. We'll put wallboard. We'll say it's in room F, and then maybe it's a late night happy hour event or something. So we'll schedule it much later. Let's do 10:35 or 34. That works. So as you can see, I just simply make my changes here, and there we are. And so now all I would have to do is save, and now that's represented in my actual internal data source, all through just the shared URL that I just showed you how to create. So that will be it for this particular webinar session. I will say that we do plan to cover internal data sources more in depth, not just for this use case, of course, because this is like a more common one, but also how you can create more of these examples from scratch, and so forth. So be on the lookout for that. It may not necessarily happen within a webinar within the upcoming weeks, as we do already have other webinars scheduled. More particularly, the next one is going to be covering AI data sources, which is really, really exciting. And I'll show you how you can use those. And then also the last one is going to be talking about MCP, and how we're able to use platforms like Claude, for example, to actually manage Wallboard directly, all just through natural language. So with that being said, am going to turn it over to the Q&A. Um, so I will go ahead and look in the chat to see if we have any questions. If you do have a question, just let me know, and I'd be happy to answer it for you. It says, "Hi, John. We have one here. It says, I saw the pagination on the food and drink menu with dots. Can you show how to do that?" I'm not sure exactly. If you're talking about this, these are technically two separate tables right here. I can show you how to set that up. I'll contact you after the webinar. But these are technically two separate tables here. So where you see these dots, this isn't actually, it's not actually paginating. But let's say, for example, you did have, let's say you had one more entry here. So like it's a perfect grid, and there was actually more entries that you had to where pagination is required, where we just fade to a new set of entries or items. I can set, what the time value is for that. Um, and yeah, so I think if that's what you're looking for is how you can fade in between these to show more entries. I can certainly help you with that, and I'll contact you after the webinar to see how we can help. All right. All right, let's see if we have any more questions. I think I see a familiar name typing in the chat, perhaps. Ah, there we go. My favorite. Thank you. I appreciate it. Great session today, John. Thank you. So if we, let's see. Can you show how to lock columns? In my case, I can lock this feature in the user interface profile, but it doesn't affect the user. Yeah, so I'll show you how to lock a column really quickly. User interface profiles may be helpful for hiding away just the option completely. Um, and maybe we need to talk about how to set that up specifically on the user, but I can at least show you how to lock a column, let's say uh, um, from the internal data source. So let's go ahead and go into one of these. Let's choose this one here. So if you go into the editor, you'll see that you can just click lock here. This will lock a column. So even if someone were to come into Wallboard and try to act like, let's say they weren't intentionally trying to do it, but they wanted to accidentally come here and remove it, they cannot because the column is locked. I can also lock certain rows. Now, maybe there are a lot of use cases for the rows specifically, but I think the most important thing is the actual locking of the columns. Because if you can lock the columns, then your template can never, the data structure, let's say, so like if I remove date and time here, the data structure that the template is expecting is a little bit different. So by locking the columns, it completely prevents that from happening. You'll never run into a case where you go, you look at the template, and you just see no data or something like that. Um, Now, if what you're trying to prevent is how to prevent someone from having the option to lock or unlock a column, then that might be user interface profiles. And again, I can talk um, to you about that after the webinar. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Again, just click on the gear icon next to columns. You can either lock or unlock it. and same here with the rows. Also, if you were to lock the rows and then go into the shared spreadsheet version, it does the same exact thing there as well. So these columns will be locked, and so will these specific rows. So nobody could come in and delete them, for example. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I'll reach out to you after the session. All right. So I think that is as good a stopping point as any. So appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, please join us for next week's webinar, which is going to be covering AI data sources. And then 2 weeks from today, we'll also be having our session on MCP, or how you can use platforms like Claude to manage Wallboard. So if you'd like to learn more about those sessions or attend them, go ahead and check out our LinkedIn. We'll have that information for you on how you can register. But thank you again so much for your time, and appreciate it. So thank you.